Hello, this is Kris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. I'll be reading an article published on the 29th of September 2014 entitled Knowledge, Memories, and Evil. And this is related to the previous audio on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this relates to how it's necessary to learn about good and evil when evil is present. Because if you do not learn about evil, as immoral as being immoral, as wrong as being wrong, then you will accept evil as good, immoral as moral, and wrong as right. Because you are ignorant. It is not a state of nescience. Evil is around you. Evil is being perpetuated by you. There is no state of nescience of evil in this case. There is an inability to live as a true self due to evil being present and due to you creating and perpetuating evil as though it were good. So I'll begin. Inspired by the movie The Giver, and at one point in the movie the main character says, "I wanted to share it with her, not all of it, the good things. Was I wrong to want that?" You see, the main character had a knowledge suppository of memories of the society, and there was only one person. There's the giver and the receiver. I don't remember exactly. So the giver was played by an old man, then the young man. The receiver would be the new giver. So he was receiving memories, which is knowledge of the past, which is knowledge of wrongs, so you can correct the wrongs, the knowledge of mistakes, so you can correct mistakes, the knowledge of evil, the knowledge of good. So in this society, it's sort of like equilibrium. They were conditioned into a certain behavioral programs, a certain conformity to society, and they also had drugs that prevented them from feeling reality. So that's why it's important to feel reality as it is in order to feel the negative and feel the harm and suffer, to endure, which is passion, which is compassion and empathy. Sympathy and empathy come from the same root of pathos, and compassion is passion, and passion and pathos all come from the same root anyways, and it has to do with enduring the suffering. So you endure the evil by knowing it exists. That's what we have to do, and that's what brings us to remove it, because we're suffering under the evil. So the only way to end our suffering is to remove evil in existence. And so long as we let evil remain, we will continue to suffer, because we're bearing the evil around us. We're bearing it in our lives. We're bearing it mentally, even if we believe, even if you manage to remove yourself from certain aspects of creating harm into the world, you still bear it psychologically and emotionally and mentally, because it's still going around and it's still part of a reality that you're in, and you're still living in it. So you can't remove yourself completely, which will be in a later part on Falsity and Evil and Neutrality. Alright, I'll continue with the article. Little post. If someone only has memories of good, or memories of falsity as a false good, i.e., that is to say, mind control, conditioning of wrongs as right, that is also to say they will only have knowledge of good or the alleged good. So if you only have memories of good, if you're only indoctrinated into what's supposed to be good, and you don't know what evil is, and you can't feel the evil, so you're indoctrinated into evil things, and you're told that they are good, like murdering children if they're not healthy enough by comparison to another one at a certain temporal time period. So you can only have a certain amount of children, and if they don't stand up to the standards, then you just exterminate them, you murder them. But that was a standard of society, and everyone accepted it as the good and right way to do things. Why did they do that? Because they had no knowledge that it was evil, that it was immoral, that it was wrong. So they were ignorant, not nescient, because it was in their presence. It was all around them. But they weren't aware of it because they were made ignorant. They were conditioned into a false self to live falsely. And then when you accept that conditioning, the false self becomes who you think you truly are. The false living becomes how you think things should be. So this is not a state of innocence from nescience of evil, because there is evil present. People were made ignorant to evil in order to have evil perpetuate. So this is what's happening right now in our world. People have no clue what objective morality is, what good is and what evil is, what right is, what wrong is, what's moral and what's immoral. And so they perpetuate evil, wrong, and immorality as though it were good, right, and morality. Because they are ignorant. They walk the dual checkerboard floor, doing both good and evil. Because they are not higher evolved consciousness beings. They act from lower modalities of self-serving motivations, which is Satanism. We are all Satanists of varying degrees. Everyone on the planet is, because we're all still participating in this system. Unless you really understand the deep care for truth and morality, and don't make it about you and your species, and you start to actually see the bigger picture and what the real root causal factor is, then you're still unfortunately in my survival and my freedom, because only other humans matter in ending slavery, because they're part of your own enslavement, and only by all of humans ending slavery together can we end human slavery. But the non-human animals, they don't matter as much to you because they can't help you end human slavery. If you get people to stop, in your mind possibly it's that if you get people to stop being harmful and evil to animals, well, that's not going to help me. I'm still going to be enslaved here. Why would I waste my time getting people to stop engaging in the moral, in the immoral baseline, and in the basic falsity in the first in-group, out-group separation and perpetuation of wrongs? You're not going to do it from there because you think, well, that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve humanity. Because you're still looking about your freedom and your survival. You want to target other people to stop engaging in things like government, and you want to get rid of the police. But the thing that isn't realized is that police and military and everything else that is false will not go away until everyone else evolves to a position where they raise themselves in consciousness in order to let those things dissipate. So as you become evolved and as everyone else becomes evolved, those criminal institutions will no longer serve their purpose, because we will no longer be engaging in amoral, animalistic, dual natures of good and evil. So they won't have a purpose to exist. We will supplant their purpose because we will become self-governing, we will become self-policing, self-militarized. We will be doing everything ourselves because we understand self-responsibility that comes with true freedom and peace. So you're not going to get rid of police and military and government until each one of us grows up to the position where those things are not even required anymore to exist. So focus on the military, focus on police, focus on the government. Well, I'm focusing on the moral baseline that allowed all those things to exist, which is the poison in consciousness, the separation and disconnection disease, where we devalue other life because it's less like us, because we view ourselves as superior and we can do whatever we want. Well, that starts in the first in-group versus out-group, which is other species. Then it gets closer to other races, and then you get to the genders. So there's very many different in-group, out-group, and one of the latest manifestations is we have government. So that ignores race, that ignores gender, which is government. So in-group, out-group, and you have police and military. You have an in-group, it's us and it's them. When one of them gets killed, it's like the end of the world and the big hunt for the cop killer. But when a regular person gets killed, well, oh well, it's just a regular person, and The cops, they have no problem murdering regular people anyway, so no wonder they get away scot-free, because it's in-group, out-group. It's not racism. Racism is a component of in-group, out-group. Just like speciesism is a component of in-group, out-group. But speciesism came first, before racism, and before sexism, and before ableism. So, root causal factors, what are you targeting? And yes, we are all Satanists. Even people who think they aren't. I'm still a Satanist in some ways. You think I've completely removed aspects of my freedom and my survival? No, but I try to look at a global picture. I try to think about all the other beings, and that's where my focus is. Because if we can get other people to stop harming other beings, then they're automatically going to stop harming other humans. Why are you going to still harm other humans when you recognize that you're not allowed to harm other animals? Well, humans and animals, so ta-da, logic prevails, and by getting people to go vegan, they're automatically not going to engage in war. They're automatically going to recognize that it's wrong to harm other people. Even if they don't understand the intricacies of how government is about slavery and control and authority, and how police and military are the same things. But I bet you they'll be able to more easily understand it once they understand that what they do to all animals is wrong, then what they do to human animals, well, you don't have a right to enslave them and exploit them either. Moral baseline, people. Moral baseline. Root, causal, foundational, core factors. That's what the target needs to be. Alright, that's enough of a rant. Here is a continuation. So I've only managed to read 2 sentences about... Anyways, so I'll just start over. If someone only has memories of good or memories of falsity as a false good, that is to say mind control, conditioning of wrong as right, then it is also to say they will only have knowledge of good or the alleged good. Then a human being, as a receiver of memories or experience, only knowing and experiencing that perceived conditioned good, cannot know the extent of evil and the degree to which it must not be manifested into being. Secondary experience, fabricated stories that allegorically tell of good versus evil, right versus wrong, honestly, will teach and provide knowledge of evil without the direct experience of needing to create it or receiving it in the physical world in order to know it exists and why not to manifest it. Understanding of secondary mental experience does not require primary physical experience to actually occur every time. We are not required to actually experience every form of evil to understand them, and that's why I highly value allegorical fiction. Because people can imagine in their own minds what a possibility of evil existing is, and then artificially create that through fictional means, not that it's really created in artificial means through our arms, but it's a fake recreation with actors to model that evil scenario. So we don't have to actually create evil to learn from evil. So I don't have all the experiences of good and evil, but I know a lot about it because I've learned through secondary experience, whether factual or fictional. It doesn't matter. The secondary experience, the morality tale, the Bible, Sumerian, anything you want. Stories are there to learn about morality, about good and evil, about the right way to live. You have to learn things from the stories. Don't take them as literal. That's why all the movies... I know a lot of what I know about natural law because I've watched a lot of movies about good and evil. All of these... stupid action movies, but there's a lot of stuff about good and evil. Because it deals with violence. I've watched drama movies and philosophical movies and television shows and anime. And I've gained a lot of knowledge through secondary experience that wasn't real. And some of it was real, some of it might be based on a true story, a book based on a true story, or you learn things from reading the book 1984. You learn things from reading Animal Farm. You learn things from reading Brave New World. Even though they're allegories, they're fictions, they are pseudo-secondary experience in a fictional world, but they're still representing scenarios of good and evil, of right and wrong, of truth and falsity, and you learn from them. So that is why we require memories, which I've gone into etymologically related to consciousness. I think it's in the article. Tracing reality, a visionary quest to knowledge or wisdom. I forget. But in there I think I have the memory etymology and how it relates to knowledge. Because in order to correct your mistakes, you have to have a memory, you have to have knowledge. So if you don't have memory of the past, passed on through generations, then the previous experiences, the previous manifested effects that have been created through causal relations, those won't be understood. So you won't know how to not create the same mistakes, and you will repeat history, and you will repeat the same mistakes. That's why knowledge is important. That's why in The Giver, it's all about memories, which is knowledge other people had. So it's secondary experience. It's like movies and stuff. It's not things you actually did, but they are stories. They're in the movie. They're given into his mind. They're inducted directly into his mind, and he can experience them through his emotions to understand the good and the evil. You know, there was memories of people being beaten or raped or something. And, you know, to experience that, you know what it is. You know what the evil is, and you feel it into your being, and you know what evil is. But when you're ignorant of these things, you don't have these secondary experiences, and you don't have you don't have the primary experience, you don't have the secondary experience to teach you as through an allegorical method, that you don't have to experience it yourself. And you can learn what the wrong is, what evil is, without experiencing it. So the receiver would receive memories and they would feel reality, and that's why they also had them doped on drugs, just like equilibrium, so that you don't feel reality. You don't feel the wrong. Because emotions it's not so much about feeling the good, because that's part of the trap, the feel-good pleasure trap. It keeps you distracted and keeps you wanting to feel good. The important part is feeling the negative, feeling the wrong, bearing good and evil, but bearing the evil and recognizing it there, to suffer and endure it because it's there. And if you want to change things, then you need to feel reality in order to feel the suffering that's there. So if you want more of that, there's the etymological breakdown on bearing good and evil, which has to do with the etymology of compassion, empathy, and sympathy, which is all about bearing good and evil. That's why I called my article that. Alright, to continue. If you only give someone good memories and knowledge, then they are nescient of evil. Or I should say they are ignorant of evil. Yeah, so they're ignorant of evil, because to be nescient of evil would be that evil doesn't even exist. So if you're only giving people good memories and knowledge, then it's not really nescience, it's just that you're not feeding them the evil that can allow them to not create evil into existence, to not repeat the same mistakes, to be right instead of wrong, and to follow truth instead of getting the consequences. If you only give someone good memories and knowledge, and they are nescient of evil, then they are less capable of dealing with the severity of evil if they encounter it in their lives. So this is related to also the bystander effect, where people feel helpless to do anything right in the midst of something wrong. So if you make people ignorant of evil and you only show them things of good and memories of good, knowledge of good, or even indoctrinate them into the conditioning of accepting evil as good, so you manipulate them and condition them into perpetuating evil, but the real evil that is surmounted, well, even in the case of accepting the evil as good, so when the evil happens, it's just like the bystander effect, you're just going to let it happen, because for you, it's normal and it's not evil, it's good. But in normal society, when we recognize an evil, many people they're the bystander effect. Well, I'm not going to get involved, I don't want to get hurt, because, you know, in our society, we're not allowed to engage ourselves in the responsibility of truth and morality as natural law causal agents. We have to allow other state gang, central authority thugs to come in and uphold natural law, uphold the guise of natural law through their coercion of authority and enslavement. But they're the only ones that get to do natural law and stop wrongs. So we're not allowed. So we have the bystander effect, where we're afraid to get involved because, you know, well, if we hurt someone, then we're going to go to prison. We didn't do anything wrong, so we're just going to let people continue to do evil and let evil run amok because we're afraid to get involved. So when you don't know evil and you encounter evil in your life, that can also be a paralyzing effect even more on this third level, where you're paralyzed. You're so shocked by the evil that you don't even know what to do. So there's conditioning of evil as good, where you let it happen, and then there's the bystander effect, where you don't know what to happen and you're afraid of doing something. And then there's another bystander effect, where you're paralyzed from fear of evil, because you've never been experienced to such horrendous evil. That's never been in your conscious awareness that this is a possibility that can exist. And so someone gets beaten right in front of your eyes, and you just stand there in complete sheer terror and shock. And you don't do anything, you're frozen, you can't move. And then they come for you and then beat you to death, as an example. That's what fear of evil can do. That's why we must know knowledge of evil. Which people are not looking at, because they're in the optimism bias and the positivity mask and the avoidance of the negative. They fear the truth. They fear facing themselves in the mirror. They don't want to look at the shadow, demon, darkness, negative, evil, and immorality within them and in the world. So as long as we continue to ignore evil, we will be keeping ourselves enslaved. We must know evil in order to not do evil, to not repeat evil. We have to have memories of the past. We have to have stories of evil, whether they happened in the past or not. It doesn't matter. Let's create all the millions of scenarios of evil and learn them, whether they happened or not. It doesn't matter. We need to know all the ways we can potentially create evil so that we don't create evil. That's the power of the apophatic negative pathway towards learning about truth and morality, is to know what is false and immoral. Alright, I'll continue. Understanding of the path and way allows you to not create evil, and it prepares you to deal with evil, but it lacks the experiential knowledge of evil and its various infection of forms. So you can understand the path and way, and usually if you understand what is good, and only that is good, and you follow only that, then technically you don't really need to know evil, because you know what is good and it's only those parameters. I don't know how you could do that, because there's a lot more things that are good and okay to do than are wrong and not okay. So I think the apophatic way is more direct and straightforward in a sense, and that there's less to know about. But it's always a dual. Knowledge of good and evil has to come together. Because if you learn the knowledge of evil, the negative pathway, then you're going to learn what is good. And if you learn what is good properly, then it should bring you to know what not to do, which is to know evil and not to do it. To continue, knowledge of good alone is not enough. It can be potentially, but there's too many potential errors and possible things to miss where it's not enough, because you won't have the knowledge of what is the evil. So knowledge, this is good, but you also need the corollary of this is evil. So it's the best position is to know them both, as opposed to only trying to know good while there's still evil going on, because then you're still going to be ignorant of the evil. And maybe your knowledge of good will allow you to not engage in the evil if it's a proper conceptual framework, but I have yet to conceptualize that and go down that road of, can we only know good and still only create good and not create evil? I haven't thought about that in as much depth. But I know the apophatic way will get you to know what not to do. And then as a result of knowing what not to do, everything else is what you can do, which is why it's an easier path to know what you can do, because you learn what you can't do first. To continue. In order to prevent evil from manifesting, knowledge of evil should be known. Also, the apophatic negative knowledge of the wrong ways can help us learn what are the many possible right ways to live, to see the light of the path and way to walk and live our lives by removing the darkness of falsity that is in our being. This is also related to, it's less about the new and the novel, it's more about the current and old condition. It's about removing the poisoned garbage, shadow, demon, darkness, falsity, evil, immorality within your being, within you, in your consciousness, in your way of life. And as you do that, if you remove all the falsity, then all that's left is good. Well, theoretically anyways. It should work out that way. Because even if it's not all good, if you remove all the evil and you're left in neutral, then the neutral without the evil goes to the default of a minor position on the positive side. But as long as there is evil, neutrality does not exist because we're in a closed system, and you will always perpetuate the evil even in a neutral position, because the neutral position allows what currently exists to continue. And that'll be into Falsity and Evil Addendum on Neutrality coming up in a few articles I'll be reading. To continue, otherwise you can end up living in falsity and not know it, because you have been conditioned to believe you are living in truth, right, and good. So again, we get back to the giver of why the knowledge of good isn't enough, because it's only the alleged knowledge of good. So it's only good when it's really the knowledge of good, but then there's so much good that you might miss one of the evils. I don't know. No, that doesn't make sense. Because if you know all the tenets of good, then the only things that can exist that are evil are contradictory to those tenets of good. And if you adhere to the tenets of good, then you won't manifest evil. In theory, as long as you adhere to those tenets. Which is why it's still, for me, it still makes more sense to know the evil. To know all the evil ways so that you know directly what not to manifest. To continue, this is why there is the, quote, spiritual axiom that, quote, good requires evil. And I put, quote, spiritual axiom because spirituality for most people is a bunch of bullshit. Spirituality is morality, and that's it. That's all that matters for me. I have no interest in spirituality beyond that conception. I've mentioned this many times before. So, there is this pseudo-spiritual axiom that good requires evil, but it gets perverted by polluted human minds who are unable to comprehend the veiled, encoded kernel of truth it contains. So I'm not sure if this is where I'm going, but where good requires evil is in knowledge, and that's all. Just like the balance of evil, people think, oh, you have to balance. Oh, life's about balance. No, you stupid morons. Life is not about balance. Life is about going one way. And there's certain aspects that you need to balance to go that one way. So you need to balance the symbolic left brain and the right brain modalities of consciousness. You have to balance the symbolic mind and the symbolic heart to make a proper consciousness functioning. And that's the symbolic one eye, the symbolic pineal gland. That's the balance. It's not, you got to walk the middle path. You got to walk the checkerboard floor. You got to be dual. No. It's not about balancing them both. It's not about doing equal amounts of good and evil. It's about balancing yourself in alignment with truth the one way. That's the balance. That's the unity and harmony of you aligning with truth and morality. That's the balance that is required from you with reality. And then there's also the balance of good and evil is knowledge of good and evil. You need both knowledge of good and evil. So good requires evil only in that to know what is really good requires knowledge of evil, as I understand it. Like I said, I haven't looked into only the single path of knowledge of good, and if that's a foolproof method to not do evil. As I currently understand it, the better option is to know good and evil. So that's why good actually requires evil. Not that good for good to exist requires evil to exist. No, it does not. Evil does not require to exist. As I said before, if only in the tree of knowledge of good and evil, if only good exists, then therefore evil does not exist, and all you have is a default condition of good, whether you have a word symbol to identify it as good or conceptual capacity to identify it as good. I don't think you could, because you need comparisons to create polarities and dichotomies. And if there is no evil existing, then good won't even be a conception for you. It'll just be what is as a default state. You know, I got a cup here. Is there an opposite to a cup on my desk? Well, not necessarily. So there's not always opposites to things. So if all you have is good, just like all I have is my cup here, well, what's the opposite? If there's no evil as a comparative assessment to create the distinction between the two, well, then you won't have an awareness of good and you won't have an awareness of evil, because evil won't exist and the only thing you'll be living in is good. Okay, I guess that's enough of a rant. I'm going to continue with the article. I dislike these trickster, quote, truth statements because they deceive those who are not evolved in consciousness enough, who do not yet have eyes to see clearly, people who don't understand symbolism and how to reinterpret these attempts at clever sayings and obfuscations of reality and just nonsense. Essentially, when you can't decode it properly, it just becomes nonsense and it leads you down the false path. To continue, I have explained how this relates to truth and good being that which is, while the opposite is a lack of that which is. Also, I have explained that the tree of knowledge of good and evil relates to the nescience of evil and the responsibility to be able to manifest evil into existence. In this context of what I am talking about, good requires evil only for us to know that which is good by knowing that which is evil. And this is the apophatic negative pathway. Evil is not required to actually exist, only its knowledge is required. With that knowledge, though, is a double-edged sword of potentiality to create evil as well. The other option is the creation of nescience through the removal of evil, and there would be no one to learn evil and copy it. Being blinded to evil and subject to its manipulation and subtle influence to corrupt our true self would be safeguarded through the adherence to the path and way of truth and morality. Knowledge of the way and path, when walked, is a method of not creating evil. But the most prudent would be knowledge of both good and evil to ensure preparedness in the face of evil manifesting from outside ourselves, our communities, etc. Knowledge of good and evil is a responsibility that we must take up if we are to ensure the continual removal of evil from our existence. So currently we don't even have the option of being nescient from no evil existing. So we only have one path to take, which is to know evil. You can't just go with just knowing the good and not creating the evil by being nescient of the evil, since evil doesn't exist for you to copy and imitate as you grow up and learn what's in reality. So we could potentially, maybe, possibly get back to that state if it even existed, if it was not just a story in a book called the Bible about innocence and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Maybe that existed, whatever. Maybe we can get to it. I don't know. But if we're gonna get to it, we gotta do what we already have to do anyways, even if we don't care about reaching that state of nescience of evil where we're innocent and only living in good. Even if you don't care about that, the only thing you can do right now, though, is to learn about evil and falsity in order to not do it. And then maybe in the end, what we'll do is we'll completely eradicate evil from our existence, and then we'll only be living in good. And we won't even know it's good because it'll be the only state there is. I personally doubt that will ever happen. I think we'll always need to know the knowledge of good and evil, but possibly at a beginning state, or even just conceptually as an allegory or symbol for how we were corrupted is that concept of nescience of evil, whereby if it's not existing and it's not anywhere around you to mimic and perpetuate into your own being, through your own being, then you won't even get it as part of your being, because the part of your being is naturally the true self and not the false self. So the false self should only come about through conditioning of the environment or people in the environment, which is how we are currently conditioned into false self and false living. Alright, let's continue with the article. If you deny someone knowledge of evil in a world of evil, you inhibit and handicap their ability to respond to reality in a prepared, effective manner. The shock of hard degrees of evil to a consciousness of innocence is enough to petrify and immobilize many people from responding in optimal ways. That's what I was talking about before with the bystander effect. But it's also, as I'm going to say here, it's related to trauma. That trauma of evil is so severe because you're completely ignorant of evil. Even though evil was existing, you were ignorant of it. It wasn't in your conscious awareness, but you could have been consciously aware of it. But, maybe there's the drugs, and they keep you in a feel-good state so that you avoid the negative, and they keep you in an emotionally dead state so you can't feel reality. So yay, psychotropic or whatever, SSRI, SNRIs, all drugs that give you feel-good states. Any compound that does that potentially has the ability to remove you from feeling reality accurately and put you into an ignorant state where the feel-good pleasure trap is more appealing than actually facing reality and the negatives in it. So when you're ignorant of evil, and evil is present, but you're ignorant of it, and then a severe shock to evil actually comes into your experiential world where you have no choice but to experience it. You can't ignore it, you can't not feel it. It's right in front of you. So you get traumatized as a victim, and then you're immobilized, and you can't respond in an optimal way to end evil. And some people may respond in poor ways and idiotic ways to end evil, and they get exterminated by evil themselves because they're ignorant of evil and what needs to be done to exterminate evil. Alright, so continuing. Trauma victims are created this way as well. The more severe the evil inflicted, the longer the duration, the more effective, the more severe the evil inflicted, and the longer the duration, the more effective the deformation of the being becomes. That is to say, the more effective the trauma conditioning is in deforming the original human being and conditioning it into something it was not meant to be, a false self and false being. So it's the original human nature, the being, our core being, is corrupted, and we're conditioned into the human condition of the false being. The point is, you don't need to do evil, you don't need to create evil, even evil doesn't need to exist. All we need are records of memory and knowledge to demonstrate the effect evil has on living. If we can't be empathic, compassionate, care, and truly feel the effect of evil in the stories, then it will have a greater... did I say can't? Sorry. If we can be empathic, compassionate, care, and truly feel the effect of evil in the stories, then it will have a greater effect on us as well in learning from it. So that's right, you need to be affected by reality, or affected by a secondary reality, a secondary experience, whether fictional or non-fictional. The story itself is what provides the meaning, and you need to derive meaning from it, whether it's real or not. So that's what the memories are, the knowledge. The memories are real or not, but the memories, it's a story, it's a real story or not. Real memories of the past. Okay, let's get real memories of the past, of things that actually happened, so that we don't repeat those same things that happened and keep repeating the same evil. Sure. And we can learn about things that may never have happened, but they're fictional, but they're still stories about evil and how not to live. We can still learn from them and not create that thing. Not that we'll be repeating the same mistake, but since someone envisioned this aspect of evil in their minds, well, we won't even need to create it in the first place. Because through imagination we can learn a lot too. Things that don't yet exist. And learn how not to create them. So you don't need evil to exist. Good does not require evil. It only requires it for you to know good and evil properly. Good requires evil. And the balance between good and evil is to balance your knowledge of good and evil. So that you're not stuck in optimism bias and positivity mask and, oh, it's all good, everything's good. Learn the evil, learn the falsity. To continue, if you know what evil is, knowledge of evil, then you will also know if it is occurring around you. If you don't know what evil is, then it may be a part of your life or a part of life around you, and you will not even see it. It will simply be the norm. It will become the normalized acceptability, the standardized, normalized acceptability within society. And wake up. That is the world we are living in right now. You don't know what evil is. You don't know that you're perpetuating evil in your life, that you're creating evil in your life, that you're supporting evil even if you're not creating it. You're supporting the evil being created by others. It's part of life all around you, and you're not even aware of it. How can you possibly think that you're going to create a world of true freedom and peace when you are completely ignorant and in denial of the evil that you perpetuate and participate in? Hence, the supreme importance of veganism to end all evil and slavery. Are you going to ignore veganism? Okay, well then continue to do evil with your left hand while you work effortlessly to remove evil with your right hand only in the human sphere. So yeah, you're going to be a united, harmonized, and integrated being within yourself while your left hand does wrong but your right hand doesn't. And not only are you going to be disunited in yourself in that contradictory behavioral capacity, but you're going to be disunited with truth and morality since you're still going to be perpetuating evil directly with one of your hands, while thinking you're not. To continue, knowledge of good and evil, but specifically knowledge of evil, the apophatic negative knowledge of the wrong way, allows us the option of choosing every other possibility there is other than the wrong, which are far more than the wrong actions that we should learn in order to not do and know the right way. The perfect mind virus for people to accept for their own enslavement to continue in the mental and physical realm is that of evil being necessary or required for good to exist. This is a huge, huge, huge mind virus. You infect people with this and they believe it wholeheartedly. Why? Because it makes them feel good. Then, oh, evil exists because it's supposed to exist. I don't have to do anything about it because it's supposed to be here. Ah, how stupid of me. All this time I've been fighting and trying to learn about good and evil and falsity and wrong and all these things, and silly me. I just had to realize that good requires evil, and then I just don't have to do anything about it. Right? How simple is that? Then I can just let evil perpetuate. Let's keep going downhill. I'm just going to go back into my hamster wheel to live, survive, procreate, enjoy life, and then I'll die. And then my descendants can just keep doing the same thing ad infinitum until we actually reach the bottom pit of stagnation and entropy, and then it's just the end of history, and then we can just welcome our own annihilation. Sounds fun. To continue, it promotes tolerance of wrongdoings in many guises that are particularly familiar to New Age thought and other mistaken pseudo-spiritual conceptual frameworks. Some people don't seem to like... Some people don't seem to like thinking things through. They just see, quote, spiritual truth and jump all over it, drooling over bullshit. Because you see, there's these clever sayings that it's like one sentence and maybe 10 words, 15 words, and it's clever sophistry, rhetoric, and it's contradictory and it's paradoxes. But oh my God, it's so clever. I feel so spiritual. Oh my God, it's such a clever saying. I feel so intelligent and spiritual with that clever saying. I've seen it on Facebook and people tell me shit and they think they're so clever and wise. Oh wow, that's so deep and wise. You're so full of shit. To continue, this is the perfect mindset for evil to continue unabated. With everyone viewing evil as the accepted norm, No one questions its permissibility of even existing as a viable action in life. Well, they don't even understand evil. They don't understand falsity. They don't understand immorality. So it's just the acceptable, standardized norm in society, and no one even questions it as a viable action. It's just, well, this is the way it is. Let's just keep doing it this way. This is also the degree to which we are currently conditioned into false living. We are conditioned to accept wrongs as right under man's law and system of living. Our bearings and compasses are sent out of whack by social engineering into falsity. We then follow the systemic false programming guide in life rather than the true natural law guidelines. The true natural moral law guidelines. So our bearings and compasses are sent out of whack by social engineering into falsity. Our acceptance into false ways of living generates the false self, and then our bearings and our compass. So here I just noticed that this was done before my article on bearing good and evil. So our bearings, yeah, bearings and compass, right? So how do you think you get a compass and bearing about good and evil? Well, you have to feel reality in order to be able to feel the suffering of that the evil creates. And that's what bearing good and evil is about. That's what compassion is about. Is to bear. You recognize the evil going on, the pain someone else is going on. Someone, yes, any animal is a someone. You can recognize the pain another animal is going through, and your compass in life, your developed heart center, your developed care, your developed compassion, sympathy, empathy, conscience, and morality recognizes the wrong because you feel reality. Your compass is more attuned than the other people who have dead compasses out of whack through the conditioning of falsity that creates their false self. So yeah, you have to bear. In order to have proper bearings, your compass has proper bearings, you need to have compassion. Your heart center, your agape true care, universal care, beyond just your identifiable aspects of humanity. Look at all the animals. Develop a wider care, true care for truth and morality in other beings. And then you'll be able to bear through that compassion and conscience, having your heart more opened to the suffering of other beings that are very similar to us. Brains and eyes and hearts and blood and so many things. And they feel, and they express feelings, and they have tears and they cry. But we have to bear reality. We have to bear it. So in the movie The Giver, just like in Equilibrium, you had drugs so that you wouldn't be able to feel reality. You wouldn't have your compass and bearings wouldn't be there because your care would be deadened. The drugs deaden your ability to feel reality. You're not affected by reality. Your ability to be affected and thereby affect reality through changing reality is diminished. You are perpetuating a victimized mentality where you continue to be a victim to evil even if you're unaware of it. You continue to perpetuate evil, and you're going to continue to create self-inflicted suffering and self-imposed enslavement. Alright, I guess that's enough for my rant there. Let's continue with the article. Evil needs to be known and understood in order to combat it. Dulling the emotions from feeling right from wrong and conditioning the mind to accept certain behavioral programs for living will ensure the acceptance to the overall schema is maintained. So you want to get people to condition to the mind to accept certain behavior, and then they'll accept the evil as good, they'll accept falsity as true, and then the overall schema of system and society will be maintained. The only way out is to care for truth and morality so that you care to learn about truth and morality, and that involves the apophatic negative pathway of learning what is false and evil and immoral. Lack of true care has us submitting to the hands that guide us along pre-selected false pathways in life. The attachments to distractions in modern life require people to enslave themselves to procure the economic survivability to sustain their standard of living. Actual needs are surpassed and superseded by wants and desires of various images in the mind we keep ourselves enslaved to. So the various images in the mind, whenever someone speaks, they have an influence over you. The things they say create images in your mind. You reference reality, and you have certain perceptual images that reference your understanding of reality. So you get indoctrinated into a false way of living that keeps you enslaved, even though you're unaware that you're keeping yourself enslaved. There's all these distractions that keep us living in an economic survivability because we want the distractions and we're paying for the distractions so that we don't have to face the reality, and it prevents us from changing. How can you change if you're not going to be aware? Well, the distractions prevent you from facing it because they're taking your time and attention away from being solitary and alone and lonely and lost and finally seeking truth and morality to get you out of that confusion, to find yourself. Because everyone doesn't understand themselves. Everyone is lost, but they think they're found. They think they understand themselves, but they don't. These images are mostly imposed and fed to us by the master priests of mind control that manipulate us with the science of imagery, casting spells on our minds, influencing our perception of reality into false ways of living. It is the same as the concept of those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. As I was saying before, you have to have memories and knowledge of evil, of mistakes, of wrongs in order not to do those wrongs. So if you don't learn from history, i.e. knowledge of the past, i.e. memories, you see, because memories are knowledge of the past. And that is what history is. The only purpose of history, okay, there's this false axiom out there that those who don't learn from history, sorry. No, this is the real one. The other one is, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. Now this only applies in the sense of those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, in the sense of if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're going to repeat them. Now, as I've already demonstrated, this does not need to be actual history. You can learn from fictional stories. You don't need real history. So when you say, well, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter to know where you've been. The only thing that matters is the story and the allegory to good and evil, truth and falsity, right and wrong, that the story is able to elucidate in order to bring you knowledge of that real memory that happened in the past or a fake memory through a fictional story. It doesn't matter. What matters is the story and what it teaches. So it's not, oh, you're doomed, It's not that, God, I keep forgetting the saying, that if, you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. It doesn't matter. Your past does not matter. It's created who you've become, so it matters in that sense. Everything that's happened before for thousands of years has led to us being here. This is cause and effect. This is collective karma. We are where we are because of things that have happened in the past, and they can't be undone, and this is where we are. So yeah, learn from the past to go forward in the future. But the important thing is aspects of good and truth. We could have been generated into existence yesterday, and there's no actual history, but the things to learn from the history that never occurred would be fictional stories that would prevent us from creating the same mistakes into the future. That's why history is important, because it's a story. You can learn from stories. You don't need literal past knowledge to know where you're going. You don't need to know where you've been to know where you're going. You need to know what not to do to know where you're going. That's the purpose of history. Whether it actually happened or not, it's the stories contained that describe aspects of reality. And if you go back to mythopoeic and analogous discourse through analogies and correspondence, that's how they made reference to reality, was through things that they already understood and re-expressed them in a similar way. You know, there's a Star Trek, The Next Generation episode that does something similar, where Captain Picard is on the surface of a planet with another alien race, and they talk in metaphor and allegory. And he's saying the river runs through him, and so the alien's talking in metaphors. So it takes Picard a while to figure it out, but that's probably the original method of describing things after you've developed a certain understanding of things you can relate through certain word symbols or pictorial symbols. Well, vocalizations first and then through pictograms. But the vocalizations, you might be limited, and when you think of other things in reality, maybe you're not able to imagine and think of new words, vocalizations, new vocal symbols to represent that, so you relate it to things you already understand, and that's where you get the metaphors and the allegories. Okay, that's enough of a sidetrack on language there. I'll continue with the article. I'll just reread the top of the paragraph here. It is the same as the concept of those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So again, I'll just mention that I view it as a fallacy to say that if you don't know where you've gone, you don't know where you're going. As I've demonstrated, you don't need to know actual history. I've already mentioned this in the Language and Reality presentation, that you cannot even verify history. So you want to believe something actually happened, then you can go ahead and believe it. But that's not what's important, because you can't actually know where you've been. So to say that, oh, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going, false. You don't need that. You don't need thousands of years of human history of where we've been to know where we're going. Those are stories, and take from them what is important to be taken from them. And that is the aspects of morality, the morality tales. Children's stories are morality tales as well. They're not real, but they're teaching through allegory and metaphor aspects that mirror reality, so you can learn about things without actually experiencing them. I hope I've made my point on history and how it's not knowable. So in case you haven't heard those other podcasts, there's works you can look into. They're on my site in the resources section. Oh, I'm not sure if I added it. I'll have to go check. Anatoly Fomenko, History, Science or Fiction, Fiction or Science. There's 4 volumes. I only read one and a bit of the second one. And before that, I read another book that's based on his work, which is The Medieval Empire of the Israelites. Anyways, this all dates with falsified chronology of history and how rulers, so I'll just briefly mention, literacy wasn't very well adopted by populace in the past. It was only people who had money to learn literacy, and the people who had money were paid by rulers in order to create stories. And these stories they created were oftentimes validations for their rulership, so they would tie them to a divine lineage. This has been done for many, many hundreds of years. Most recently it was done in I forget if it's 1500s, 1600s, or 14, or the 11th, the 13th century. I don't remember. It was Edward or King Edward, King James. Was it James? No. I don't remember who. At one point, there was British Israelism created, where they fabricated a lineage going back to King David so they could justify rulership. And this is where the Protestant Church was created as a delineation from the Roman Catholic, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and to dissociate from the rulership of the emperor of the Byzantine Empire and the church, and they created their own church which was ruled by the king. So again, they created their own narrative, their own story, their own fiction of the past in order to validate their rulership. Anyways, there's so much more I could talk about this. I'm just saying it's a fallacy to believe that you need to know where you've been to know where you're going in terms of ancient history. So yes, in your own personal life, you better know where you've been to know where you're going so you don't repeat the same mistakes, and learn from secondary experiential knowledge and stuff like that. But you don't need to know thousands of years back that you can never even verify to know where you're going. The only thing you need is the stupid fucking story that's either real or not, and you can't verify it anyways. So learn from the story the things that it has to teach about morality in the right way and the wrong way. That's all. Thank you. I'm going to continue now. If you lack knowledge of certain behavioral patterns that created wrong results, then it is wise to learn from that past historical experience rather than make the same mistakes over and over in human history. Failure to learn evil, just as failure to learn from the mistakes of the past, will lead to a repetition of that which we choose to ignore, the evil, or mistakes being made, and allowed to be made over and over. So you fail to learn evil, guess what's going to happen? The evil that you're ignoring is going to continue, and collectively we're going to keep making the same mistakes. You're going to keep making the same mistakes even though you're not aware you're making a mistake because you didn't want to learn from the past, you didn't want to learn from memories, you didn't want to learn from knowledge. Whether it's real or not, the story is what matters, and it provides us with the knowledge of evil. 1984, Animal Farm, Brave New World. None of that is real, but damn if you are not going to gain a hell of a lot of knowledge about the reality we are living in. To continue, if you learned the mistake, you don't need to know everything about the past, which you can't anyways. If you know the path and way, then you know how to not create evil, and you don't need to learn everything about the past either. As I say, it's very prudent to know about the evil ways so that you don't repeat them. But if your methodology for knowing the path and way is good enough so that you do not strive from the path and way, then it will automatically point to you what is negative and false and evil as a result of non-conformity to the path and way. But it's much more arduous and difficult to comprehend evil through this way, I think. To continue, if you know what not to do, then you won't be making mistakes others did, because to do so is a violation of the truth you learned. The only way to make mistakes others do is by not following the path and way of truth. The knowledge of the truth and morality leads one to know the evil as well, just as the apophatic path leads to truth. So I'm making the case for both the cataphatic path, which is positive through knowing what's good, and the apophatic path, the negative, through knowing what's evil. And it's the same thing applied to knowledge of the first mover, prime cause, what is called God. The first causal source in causal relations. When you try to chase back the chain of relation and causality, eventually you get to a prime mover, an original cause. So you can use the apophatic way to understand what that is instead of the cataphatic way of affirmation. You can say what that thing is not in order to understand what it is in a way. Since we can't really know what it is and really identify it, we can't ostensibly point to it, so it's a difficult thing to understand. It's only in the realm of universals, it's intangible itself, so we can't really know it fully and right in front of our eyes in that sense. To continue, learning of good to learn of evil, or vice versa, to learn evil to learn of good, are both valid ways to learn of good and evil. When you learn of good, the opposite is evil and impermissible. When you learn of evil, the opposite is good and permissible. However, we seem to not learn enough about either, nor do we develop the understanding of the contradictory modality. That is to say, when we learn of one, we aren't automatically correlating the opposite in our understanding of life. So even though you can learn about the good through learning of the evil, and you can learn about the evil through knowing about the good, most people do not make the correlations between the contraries and opposites. They just say, oh, this is evil, then that's good. And say, oh, this is good, then therefore that's evil. They don't make the correspondences in their mind. They don't apply a dualistic conceptual framework. So they don't learn. A dualistic conceptual framework is to diagnose, judge, discern, evaluate, weigh, etc. And, oh, there you go. I have a link to my dualistic conceptual framework and infographic presentation right here. Our dualistic conceptual framework is broken and cannot discern, navigate, or understand reality correctly. We are all suffering as a result, as it leads people to create an evil ignorantly rather than good knowledgeably. So as I mentioned, when you don't correlate the opposite, and you're only thinking of it in one way, then you're not applying the dualistic conceptual framework accurately. So if you learn of the good, but you don't learn of what's evil, then you're not really applying the contrast. You're just saying, oh, well, that's good, and you're ignoring what's evil. You're just going to focus on the good, and there's the positivity and optimism bias. So to continue the last paragraph, the movie The Giver demonstrates how the ignorance of evil will produce evil. In a false innocence of conditioned falsity and acceptance of false as truth, of evil as normal and hence good, the people were not able to discern evil from good truly, from right from wrong truly, and therefore allowed evil to pervade their lives because it adopted the guise of goodness through the limitation of knowledge and understanding of life and reality, of morality and truth. The mind control was so pervasive that they had created a web of justifications for living in a scientific dictatorship, all for efficiency, the utilitarian greater good deception. And I did an audio and video on relating to the utilitarian greater good deception yesterday. I don't know if it was why does nothing change, or the true self seeks truth and morality, or failure to actualize ourselves in truth and morality. Is one of those. Anyways, there's more information. I went on a little bit of a few-minute rant on the utilitarian and the hive mind and the greater good aspects of things. So sorry about that, but you can look into or do a search on my site for utilitarian and you'll find the other article. Alright, so that's the end. That's knowledge, memories, and evil. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.